Good evening, everyone. CJ Mills here with your latest episode of the Agile PMP. As promised, today's your Wednesday workshop, and we're going to start talking about what project management is. Right? That's so. On our Sunday status report, we followed up with your questions, and one of the things that we spoke about was let's give an introduction and let's tell people what project management is. So before we start, I just got to give a shout out to my wife. She got me this awesome shirt. This is a while ago for Christmas actually, and if at first you don't succeed, try doing what your project manager told you to do. I love this shirt. Love this shirt. So I just have to give her a shout out for that. All right, so back to the task at hand. What is project management? So first of all, most projects or all projects are temporary. So anything that has a definite start date and a definite end date, that's a project. It's got to be temporary. Your project also has to create something unique, right? It's got to be a one-off. So, last project I had, I built a big planter. We just moved into a house here in May, and we built a big planter about 40 feet long, 5 feet wide, so we could have a garden so my son could see all these fruits and vegetables growing, right? So that's a project. Temporary, it's got a beginning and end, and it definitely produces something that's unique. It's a one-off. So that's what projects are. So then what is project management? Now, in preparation for this, I was researching, what do people think project management is? I went and did a general search, and you can find everything from Wikipedia to any dictionary on any dictionary website, any, project management software website, and all of them have something different. That's what's interesting. That's how immature this field is. Nobody really knows what project management is. In fact, I talked to a lot of my friends, my family members, and they still have no idea. I said, what do you do? What is a project? What is project management? What do you really do? So in the end, it's anytime a company wants to create something that's unique and they want to create this one off and they have a deadline to do it. You're always constrained by something. So that's what projects are, and that's what project management is. But projects apply to our everyday life. So I talked about building that planner. Some of you guys have projects that happen all the time. So maybe if you're parents, getting your kids ready every day for school, that's a project. Changing your oil, definite start and end time. There is a goal for the project, and it's a one-off. That's a project. You want to draw or create a painting, project. All right, so yes, there's always different projects. I see comments coming in. Yes, Rachel, there's always different projects. Excuse me, Rochelle, see, another project. Is to realize what I'm seeing in the names here. So projects, temporary, definite start and end date, and it produces something unique. All right, so while you guys are joining, tell me what some of your projects are. I'm curious to know, like, what do you have that's going on that you want to start that's not going to take you forever, and you want to produce something, you want to create something, right? Maybe it's a new business venture, maybe it's a new product that you want to get out to the people, maybe it's a gift you have for family members. What kind of projects do you guys have, and we can talk about that. But let's now jump into the management aspect of it. So project management is then managing all the constraints. All right, so you have people, they're typically constraints, but what most companies will say the constraints of projects are scope, schedule, budget. So budget, how much money do you have? Schedule, how much time do you have? And scope, what is it that you actually want to create? All right, so those are the typical constraints you have. And then the last constraint that comes up is going to be quality. What are the requirements that you have, and how do you meet those requirements with consistency? All right, we'll get into another day about quality and why McDonald's has the highest quality burger in the world. Yeah, I said it, the Big Mac, the most quality burger in the world, and everyone's chasing them, but we'll get to that on another day. All right, so you have scope, schedule, budget. Those are the triple constraints. And usually we're constrained by those things. So meaning time, we don't have forever. We have maybe a month or a week or a couple of days to get it done. All right, and then you have the cost or the budget. We only have so much money. We always have limited resources. All right, and then you have the scope of exactly what you want to do. So I have somebody who's making phone calls. I see writing a short ebook. I see creating content. Those are all the scope of the job that you have, and now you have a certain amount of time to get it done, and you have a certain amount of money, or resources. It doesn't have to be money, but it could be people, that are doing the work for you. It could be the supplies or the materials that you have. These are all of the resources that you have. So you're limited by those. All right. So now, as you sort of go through and manage this idea of making this creation from beginning to end, how do you do it in the most efficient and effective method? Because a lot of times most of us will start these projects and then we'll never finish them. Or we'll start projects and they'll go on and on forever. We'll say, oh, what if we could add this? And wouldn't it be great if we could do that? Case in point, garden. I started this garden. It was just supposed to be 4 feet wide, maybe 12 feet long. It ended up being 5 feet wide and 40 feet long. Right, and then I was just going to have maybe several vegetables in there. I ended up adding some strawberries that didn't really do anything. Right, and then I was going to mulch it, but that wasn't good enough. I had to get alfalfa. And then I was going to hand water it, and I said, well, why not add a drip system? And then I couldn't just have a drip system. I said, well, I need a timer, so that way I don't have to always turn the water on. And to this day, I don't use a timer. I go and I turn the faucet on, and I sit there and I talk to the plants and I watch the plants grow, if you can watch plants grow. But my project keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Why? Because I'm not managing it. Because I manage projects for other people, and so when I get to my individual life, I don't want to have to manage the projects. I just want to have fun with it. But that's what project management is. It's making sure that you reach your goals in the most efficient and effective method. All right, so the main thing is, can you get to the finish line? Do you have a clear path? Right? And a lot of times with the projects, there aren't clear paths. It's very ambiguous. It's sort of like, well, we think we can accomplish this, and we might be able to accomplish that. So let's talk about one of the projects here. Let me scroll up and see what we have here. Let's talk about writing 2 chapters of a book. All right, that's a good project. It's definite start and end time. Right? You have the scope of the 2 chapters in the book, and you have limited resources to do it. So if you were starting that project, the first thing you'd want to do is say, okay, what are the goals? What are my goals as a person? And then what are the goals for this book? And how is this book going to help me achieve or further the goals that I want to accomplish as a person? That's the first thing that you want to do. And then you want to find out, who are all the players involved? Who's going to be affected by writing this book? Is it friends? Maybe you have friends that you're going to write about in the content of the book. Are they family members? Maybe some folks that are going to help you out. So who's everybody that's involved? So that's what you want to do. Identify all of the stakeholders. And a stakeholder is anybody whose interest is going to be negatively or positively affected by your project. So if you're writing a book, there's going to be some people who are mentioned in the book. They're going to be affected. Maybe you're going to take away some time that you would have with your family members because you're going to spend time writing this book. They would be affected. You're going to have some vendors or some contractors, some partners that you're going to use to either publish the book or to help you get that book out. They're going to be stakeholders as well. They're going to have an interest in this project. So you got to figure out who all those people are. Now that you figured that out and you know what the goals of your project are, you're ready to start planning. All right. So then your next deal is to think about, okay, what are all the requirements for writing this book? All right. So we talked about 2 chapters. Chrissy said she wants to write 2 chapters of this book. Okay, what are the requirements? How long do your chapters need to be? How many paragraphs? Do you have a character count? Right? What's the content? Is it going to be a fiction book, nonfiction? Is it going to be a biography or autobiography? These are the things that you want to think of. Now that you've got your requirements, then you want to go out and you want to sort of define the scope. All right, so you want to say what you're doing, what you're not doing, how you're going to do it, and how you'll know that you're finished. Right? So you'll say, okay, I am writing 2 chapters of the book that are going to be 10 pages long each, minimum of 2,000 characters. Right? Then you got to say what you're not doing. I am not writing 10 chapters. I'm not writing a science fiction novel. Right? I'm not going to write a manuscript or a biography. You got to say what you're not doing. And then you got to say how you're going to do it. I'm going to write this book by speaking the book. I'm just going to get a voice recorder and then use some software that's going to then transcribe it for me. Or I'm going to sit down and manually write the book by hand. Right? And then you got to say, well, how am I going to achieve sign up? How do I know that it's finished? And you have to say, okay, well, once I have 2 chapters that are X amount of pages long with Y amount of characters, I know that I've achieved this, right? So there goes the scope of your work. Right? And so now you have the requirements and you've got the scope of your project. And the next thing you want to do is start to break your work down. So you want to say, all right, well, what does it mean to write a book? I've got to have chapters. Maybe I got to have pictures. Maybe I got to have a table of contents, an index. I got to have a cover. I got to have a purpose. Right? So you would start there. And that's just one of the 9 knowledge areas, right? That's scope. Now we'll jump into time. So you go from that sort of breakdown of the scope, and then you say, what are all the activities that's required? And you'll figure that out. You'll sequence them out. And I'm going to stop there for now because there's a lot more that's involved in it, but that's the basics of your project. So now that we talked about the scope, we'll talk about, the schedule, and then we'll get to the budget, and then we'll get to quality, we'll get to human resources, who you communicate with, all the risks that you got to think about, procurements, what do you need to buy for this, and then stakeholders, how do you keep everybody engaged? Those are all the next pieces, and we'll probably continue with that on our Friday follow-up. We'll probably jump into the schedule, into the cost, depending on how much time we have. But yes, I see, Christy, you're following along. You got the requirements, you got the scope, chop it up. That's the big thing right there. And then time management is a struggle. It's only a struggle if you don't write it down, because if you don't write it down, then it's not real. It's sort of like it's just in your head, and that's sort of vague, and it'll sort of carry on from time to time, and you'll end up like me, where you wanted to start with this 4-foot by 10-foot garden, and you end up with a 5 by 40-foot garden that ends up having a drip system and alfalfa on it. All right, so sometimes you definitely got to write out your goals. So let's just recap on this. All right, you're going to start out with what the goals of you, what you want to accomplish. And then you're going to jump into what the goals of your project are. Make sure that those two things are aligned, because if they're not aligned, then figure out why. And it's okay if they're not, but you definitely want to know that. And then figure out who all the players are. All right? Find all of your stakeholders. Who's going to be involved? Who's going to be impacted by your project positively or negatively? All right? Then go out and gather requirements from all those people. Take those requirements, define out your scope, and break the work down. That's step 1. That's step 1 of creating your project. All right? So I hope this helps. We'll jump back in on Friday. We'll do our Friday follow-up. We'll recap today, and then we'll jump into breaking down the scope into activities so that you guys can develop a schedule, and then taking that schedule and turning it into a budget, figuring out how much those activities cost, and then having a full-scale budget. And we'll, again, after that, we'll go into quality, we'll go into human resources, communication, risk, what you got to buy, or procurements, and then all the stakeholders, keeping them engaged. All right, so I appreciate all of you guys who have been joining me for this. I appreciate your feedback, so I know what to give you guys now, so we'll continue with this. As always, please share this video. I'm incredibly grateful for you guys, and just remember, create solutions, adapt processes, and think strategically. You guys have a good night.